Stop, don't scroll, don't close this, not right now. This moment matters more than you think. There is a reason you clicked on this video, and it's not random, it's not by accident, it's because a part of you is tired. A part of you is questioning everything. You've been pushing, trying, showing up, even when it feels like nothing is moving. And now, quietly, that thought is getting louder. The thought that maybe it's time to quit. Maybe it's not working. Maybe this just isn't for you. But here's the truth that most people never hear at the right time. The moment you feel like walking away is often the exact moment everything is about to change. And almost no one realizes it while they're in it. There's a hidden pattern behind success that people don't talk about. Not because it's a secret, but because it doesn't look exciting from the outside. Real progress doesn't always show up in obvious ways. It builds in silence. It builds in repetition. It builds in days that feel pointless. Research in human behavior and performance shows that growth is not linear. It doesn't move in a straight line. It stacks under the surface, slowly, quietly, until one day it breaks through all at once. And here's the part most people miss. The hardest phase usually comes right before that breakthrough. The frustration you feel right now is not a sign that it's over. It's often a sign that you're close, closer than you've ever been. In this video, you're going to understand why that feeling of wanting to quit shows up when it does. You'll see what's actually happening in your mind when motivation drops and doubt rises. You'll learn why so many people give up just before things start working, and how small shifts in thinking can completely change the outcome. This isn't empty motivation. This is about understanding the pattern so you don't become part of the statistic that quits too early. Because once you see it clearly, you won't look at your struggle the same way again. There's also something else most people overlook. The brain is wired to protect you, not to push you toward long-term success. When things get hard, when results don't come quickly, your mind starts sending signals to stop. It creates doubt. It highlights every mistake. It makes the journey feel heavier than it really is. Not because you're failing, but because your brain is trying to keep you safe from discomfort. And this is where most people step back. Not because they can't succeed, but because they misread the signal. They think resistance means they're on the wrong path, when in reality, it often means they're pushing past their old limits. And here's a lesser-known truth that changes everything. Many breakthroughs don't come from doing something new. They come from staying long enough for your past efforts to finally connect. Skills take time to compound. Effort takes time to translate into results. There's a delay between what you do and what you see. And during that delay, it feels like nothing is happening. But beneath that feeling, things are aligning in ways you can't measure yet. This is why people who stay consistent, even when it feels pointless, are the ones who eventually move ahead. Not because they are more talented, but because they didn't leave before the results showed up. Right now, you might feel like you're repeating the same cycle. Trying, failing, trying again, getting tired, losing energy. It feels slow, it feels heavy. But what you don't see is how much you've already built. Every attempt changed you in some way. Every effort added something, even if it didn't look like progress at the time. Growth doesn't always feel like growth. Sometimes it feels like confusion. Sometimes it feels like doubt. Sometimes it feels like standing still. But it's still happening. So if you're at that edge where quitting feels easier than continuing, this video is going to give you something most people never get at this stage. Clarity. Not false hope. Not empty words. But a real understanding of where you are in the process and what comes next if you don't stop. Because once you understand that you are closer than you think, the struggle starts to feel different. It doesn't disappear, but it makes sense. And when something makes sense, it becomes easier to face. Stay with this until the end. Because the shift you're about to hear is simple, but it changes how you see everything. It will help you recognize the moment when most people walk away, and it will show you how to move through it instead of stopping. That alone can separate you from everyone who started with the same goal but didn't finish. And sometimes, that's the only difference between success and regret. You're not here by chance. You're here because a part of you is still holding on, and that part deserves a real answer, not another reason to quit. So stay with me, because what comes next might be exactly what you needed to hear at the exact right time. Welcome to the channel. If this message speaks to you, subscribe and stay connected, because this is where you come back when you need clarity, direction, and a reminder to keep going. It didn't start like this. At the beginning, there was energy, there was focus. You showed up with a clear intention, ready to give it everything. You made a plan, maybe a simple one, maybe something detailed, but it felt real, it felt possible. And for a while, you kept going. You stayed consistent, you pushed through distractions, you did what you said you would do, but slowly something changed. Not all at once, not in a dramatic way, but little by little. The excitement faded, the results didn't match the effort. The time you invested didn't give you anything back that you could clearly see, and now it feels like you're stuck in a loop that keeps repeating itself. You try, you wait, you hope, and then nothing happens, and the silence between effort and results starts to feel heavy. You kept going longer than most people would. That part matters, even if it doesn't feel like it. You gave more time, more focus, more energy than anyone expected from you. You stayed disciplined when it wasn't easy. You pushed through days when you didn't feel like doing anything at all. But instead of feeling proud, it started to feel frustrating. Because effort without visible progress creates doubt. It makes you question everything. It makes you question your ability, your decisions, your direction. You start asking yourself if you're doing something wrong, if you missed something important, if this was ever the right path in the first place. And then comes that quiet thought that keeps returning. Maybe this isn't working. Maybe it's not meant for you. Maybe all this time could have been spent on something else. That thought doesn't come loudly at first. It shows up slowly, it stays in the background. But over time it becomes stronger. It starts shaping how you feel about your work. It starts changing how you show up. The same actions that once felt purposeful now feel forced. The same goals that once excited you now feel distant. And you begin to lose that connection with why you started. You look around and it doesn't help. Other people seem to be moving forward. They seem to be getting results. They seem to be progressing faster, even if they started later. And that comparison adds another layer of pressure. It makes your own journey feel even slower. It makes your effort feel smaller. You start thinking that maybe they have something you don't. Maybe they figured something out that you missed. And even if you try to ignore it, it still affects you. It still changes how you see your own progress. You've probably had moments where you tried to reset. You told yourself you would start fresh. You tried new approaches. You changed your routine. You adjusted your strategy. You gave it another push. But after some time, the same feeling returned, the same lack of results, the same silence, and that's when it starts to feel like a pattern that won't break. Like no matter what you do, the outcome stays the same. That's the point where frustration turns into exhaustion. And yet, even in that stage, you didn't fully stop. Something in you kept going. Maybe not at the same level, maybe not with the same energy, but you didn't completely walk away. And that matters more than it seems. Because staying even in a reduced way means something is still active inside you, something still believes, even if it's small, even if it's quiet. The hardest part about this phase is that it doesn't give you clear feedback. If you were failing in an obvious way, you could adjust. If you were succeeding in a visible way, you could stay motivated. But being in between, when nothing is clear, when nothing confirms your effort, that's where most people struggle the most. That's where it feels like time is passing without meaning, like days are blending together without progress. Like you're putting energy into something that isn't giving anything back. And it creates a strange kind of pressure. Not loud, not dramatic, but constant. A feeling that you should be further ahead by now. A feeling that something should have happened already. A feeling that you're behind, even if you don't know compared to what. And that pressure slowly builds. It affects your focus. It affects your patience. It affects how you see each new attempt. You might even start lowering your expectations. Not because you want to, but because it feels safer. It feels easier to expect less than to keep hoping for something that hasn't shown up yet. And when expectations drop, effort often follows. Not because you're lazy, but because your mind is trying to protect you from disappointment. It's trying to reduce the gap between what you want and what you're getting. But here's where something important is happening, even if it doesn't look like it. Beneath all that frustration, beneath all that doubt, there is still movement. It's not the kind of movement that shows up clearly. It's not the kind that gives immediate results. But it's there. Every time you try, something adjusts. Every time you repeat an action, something improves, even if it's small. Every time you face difficulty, your response changes a little. These changes are not loud. They don't announce themselves. They don't give you a clear signal. But they build. Most people expect progress to look obvious. They expect a clear line between effort and results. But real progress doesn't follow that pattern. It collects quietly. It builds in layers. It stays hidden until it reaches a point where it can finally show itself. And until that point, it feels like nothing is happening. Think about how many times you've repeated the same action. How many times you've practiced, worked, tried, adjusted. Each of those moments added something even if you couldn't measure it. Skills don't grow in one step. They grow through repetition. Understanding doesn't come in one moment. It builds through exposure. Confidence doesn't appear suddenly. It develops through experience. And all of this happens beneath the surface. The problem is not that progress isn't happening. The problem is that it's not visible yet. And because it's not visible, it's easy to assume it doesn't exist. It's easy to believe that all your effort is going nowhere. But that belief is based on what you can see, not on what is actually happening. There is a delay between effort and results. That delay is where most people give up. Not because they can't succeed, but because they can't see the connection between what they're doing and what they want. They stop before the results have time to appear. They leave just before the work starts to show. And that's the part that changes everything if you understand it. Because if progress is hidden, then the absence of visible results does not mean the absence of growth. It just means you are still in the phase where things are forming. It means you are still building the foundation. And foundations are not meant to be seen. They are meant to support what comes later. You are learning things that you didn't know before. You are handling situations differently than you used to. You are developing patience even if it feels forced. You are building discipline even if it feels heavy. These are not small things. These are the exact elements that create long-term results. But they don't feel like progress because they don't give immediate rewards. And because they don't feel rewarding, it becomes harder to continue. That's why most people stop here. They don't stop because they reached their limit. They stop because they misread the situation. They think they are stuck, when in reality they are in the middle of a process that hasn't revealed its outcome yet. Every time you continue despite not seeing results, you are doing something that most people don't. You are extending your timeline beyond immediate feedback. You are allowing your effort to accumulate. And accumulation is what leads to breakthroughs. Not single actions, not short bursts of motivation, but consistent effort over time. There is also something else happening that you might not notice. Your standard is changing. What used to feel difficult now feels normal. What used to require effort now feels automatic. That shift is a sign of growth, but because it happens gradually, you don't always recognize it. You only notice when something is new or challenging. You don't notice when something becomes easier. So even when it feels like you are standing still, you are not the same person who started. Your thinking has changed. Your awareness has changed. Your ability to handle challenges has changed. These changes are subtle, but they matter. They are preparing you for the moment when results start to appear. And that moment doesn't always come slowly. Sometimes it comes suddenly. After a long period of nothing, things start to move quickly. Opportunities appear, results become visible, progress becomes clear, and from the outside it looks like it happened overnight. But it didn't. It was built over time, during the phase where nothing seemed to be happening. The question is not whether progress is happening. The question is whether you stay long enough to see it. Because the work you've already done doesn't disappear. It stays with you, it builds with you, it accumulates, waiting for the moment when it can finally show itself. Right now, it feels like you are far away from where you want to be. It feels like there is still a long distance to cover. But that feeling is based on what you can see, not on what you have already built. And if most of your progress is hidden, then your current position might not be as far as it seems. You might be closer than you think. Not because something magical is about to happen, but because your past effort has already moved you forward in ways you haven't fully recognized yet. And if that's true, then the decision to keep going or to stop becomes more important than it appears. Because stopping now doesn't just end your current effort. It also disconnects you from the results that your past effort was leading toward. And continuing doesn't guarantee immediate success, but it keeps you in the process long enough for your work to finally show up in a visible way. It allows everything you've built so far to reach its next stage. It gives your effort the time it needs to become something real. So even if it feels like nothing is working, even if it feels like you're repeating the same cycle, even if it feels like you're wasting time, there is another possibility that is just as real, that you are in the middle of something that hasn't revealed itself yet, that your progress is hidden, not absent, that your effort is building, not disappearing, and that the distance between where you are and where you want to be might be smaller than it looks right now. Something needs to change now, and it's not your goal, it's not your path, it's not even your effort. It's the way you are looking at everything you've been through. Because right now, you are measuring your journey in a way that makes you feel like you're losing, even when you're not. You are calling it failure when it's actually part of the process. You are calling it delay when it's actually preparation. And that small shift in meaning is what is draining your energy. Because when you believe you are failing, everything feels heavy, every step feels pointless, every effort feels like a mistake. But when you start to see it clearly, when you look at the same situation from a different angle, the weight begins to change. Not because the work becomes easier, but because it starts to make sense. You are not failing. That idea doesn't match what you've been doing. Failure is stopping. Failure is not trying again. Failure is walking away and closing the door completely. But you didn't do that. You kept going. You showed up even when it didn't feel right. You tried again even after things didn't work. That is not failure. That is learning in its rawest form. Every time something didn't go the way you expected, it gave you information. It showed you what doesn't work. It pushed you to adjust. It forced you to think differently. And even if it didn't give you the result you wanted, it still moved you forward in a way you didn't notice at the time. Think about how people actually improve at anything. It doesn't happen by getting everything right from the beginning. It happens by getting things wrong and then correcting them. It happens by making mistakes and then understanding them. It happens by repeating the process until something clicks. What you are going through is not a sign that you are doing something wrong. It is a sign that you are in the middle of learning something that takes time to understand. And the more complex the goal, the longer that process takes, the more layers it has, the more moments where things don't make sense. You are also not behind. That idea only exists when you compare your journey to someone else's timeline. But your path is not the same as theirs. Your starting point is different. Your pace is different. Your experiences are different. When you say you are behind, you are measuring your progress using someone else's position as the standard. And that standard doesn't belong to you. It doesn't reflect your process. It doesn't reflect what you've been through. It only creates pressure that makes everything feel slower. What if instead of thinking you are behind, you start to see it as preparation? Preparation for something that requires more from you. Preparation for something that needs you to be stronger, more patient, more aware. Because not every goal can be reached quickly. Some things take time because they require you to grow into the person who can handle them. And that growth doesn't always feel good. It doesn't always feel like progress. Sometimes it feels like resistance. Sometimes it feels like delay. But it is still happening. Every moment you stayed consistent when it was hard, you built discipline. Every time you kept going without immediate results, you built patience. Every time you faced doubt and didn't completely stop, you built resilience. These are not small things. These are the exact qualities that make long-term success possible. And they don't develop in easy conditions. They develop in moments like this, where things are unclear, where results are not visible, where you have to rely on something deeper than motivations. So when you look back at everything you've been through, don't label it as wasted time. Don't reduce it to a series of failed attempts. Look at it as preparation that is shaping you for what comes next. Look at it as a process that is building something inside you that you will need later. Because if you remove that meaning, if you remove that perspective, then all that effort feels empty. And when effort feels empty, it becomes harder to continue. Now bring this back to where you are right now. Not in general, not in theory, but you in this moment. You've been carrying this for a while. You've been dealing with this internal pressure, this quiet doubt, this constant question of whether to keep going or not. And despite all of that, you are still here, you are still listening, you are still looking for a reason to continue. That alone says something about you. It says that you haven't given up yet. It says that there is still something inside you that wants to move forward. You've come too far to stop now. That is not just a phrase. It is a fact based on everything you've already done. The time you invested, the effort you gave, the challenges you faced, they all add up. They all mean something. And stopping now doesn't just pause your progress. It cuts off the connection between what you've already built and what it was leading to. It leaves everything unfinished, not because it couldn't work, but because it didn't get the time it needed. You didn't go through all of this for nothing. Every moment of doubt, every attempt that didn't work, every time you had to push yourself when you didn't feel like it, all of that has value. Even if you can't see the result yet, it is still part of something that is forming. And walking away now would mean leaving before that process has a chance to complete itself. Right now, you might not feel strong, you might not feel confident, you might not feel sure about what comes next. But you don't need all of that to take the next step. You only need enough to continue. You only need enough to not stop. Because the next step doesn't require perfection. It doesn't require clarity about the entire path. It only requires a decision to move forward, even if it's small. And this is where everything starts to shift. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a sudden breakthrough, but in a quiet decision to keep going, to try one more time, to take one more step, to give one more effort, even if it feels small. Because progress doesn't always come from big actions. Sometimes it comes from small actions, repeated consistently. One more try. That's all it takes right now. Not a complete restart. Not a perfect plan. Just one more attempt. One more moment where you choose to continue, instead of stopping. One more chance to move forward, even if it feels uncertain. One more step. It doesn't have to be a big step. It doesn't have to change everything immediately. It just has to move you slightly ahead of where you are now. Because movement, even small movement, creates momentum, and momentum is what turns effort into progress. One more day. You don't need to solve everything today. You don't need to have all the answers right now. You just need to get through this day without giving up. You just need to stay in the process for one more day, and then another, and then another. Because consistency over time is what creates results, not single moments of motivation. Keep it simple. Keep it steady. Keep it moving. You don't need to overthink it. You don't need to analyze every detail. You just need to stay in motion. Because stopping is what breaks the process, and continuing is what allows it to unfold. And even if it feels slow, even if it feels repetitive, even if it feels like nothing is changing, remember that movement is still happening. It may not be visible yet, but it is building, it is stacking, it is getting closer to a point where it will finally show. So don't look for a huge sign. Don't wait for a perfect moment. Don't expect a sudden shift that makes everything easy. Focus on what you can do right now. Focus on the next action. Focus on staying in the process. One more try, one more step, one more day. Keep going. Maybe you're not stuck. Maybe nothing is broken. Maybe the path didn't disappear. Maybe you're just standing in the part of the journey that feels the hardest to understand. The part where nothing looks clear. The part where effort feels invisible. The part where doubt gets louder than progress. And maybe, just maybe, that's not a sign to stop. Maybe that's a sign that something is building, even if you can't see it yet. Because the truth is simple. Even if it doesn't feel easy, you don't always feel progress while it's happening. You don't always see results while they are forming. And you don't always recognize how close you are when you're in the middle of it. Right now it feels slow. It feels uncertain. It feels like you're far away. But what if that feeling is not the truth? What if it's just the surface? What if underneath all of this, you are closer than you've ever been? Closer than yesterday, closer than last week, closer than the version of you who almost stopped before this. And if that's true, then stopping now would mean leaving at the exact moment things were about to shift. It would mean walking away not because you couldn't make it, but because you didn't stay long enough to see it happen. You've carried this for a reason. You've stayed through moments that tested you. You've continued when it would have been easier to walk away. That is not random, that is not meaningless, that is part of something that is still unfolding. And you don't need everything to be clear right now. You don't need perfect confidence. You don't need full certainty. You just need to hold on a little longer. You just need to keep going. Because the moment you're about to give up might be the moment everything finally changes. If this reached you at the right time, don't let it be just another video you forget. Stay connected. Subscribe to the channel so you don't lose this reminder when you need it the most. Like this video so more people who feel the same way can find it. Share it with someone who might be close to giving up, someone who needs to hear this right now. And most importantly, don't stop here. Keep going.